This is the BYD Seal U. It's the company's latest SUV offering in Europe, and it's really a competitor for all those popular models you've heard of, like the Ford Kuga and Nissan Qashqai. It is a pretty decent size, although it only comes as a 5-seat version. What is different about this compared to previous BYD models that we've had so far is that this isn't a fully electric model. Instead, it comes with the company's DMI plug-in hybrid technology, which is good news for those buyers that perhaps aren't fully ready to go electric. The Seal U comes from the same design family of the saloon car that bears the same name, and you can see the similarities here when you look at the headlights, how that daytime running light wraps around as well. On the front, there's quite an open bumper design here with these horizontal louvres here, and they continue onto the side. And that's one of the ways that you can tell that this is the plug-in hybrid model, because in China, they do offer a fully electric version of the Seal U, and that doesn't have any of these details. They're all covered in. But for now, at the moment, BYD is only going to offer the plug-in hybrid model. So this is how it's going to look when you see it on the road. BYD has played it a little bit conservative with the styling. You've got 19-inch alloy wheels, which are a decent size without being too big. You've got a little bit of chrome on the door handles. You've got aluminium finish on the roof rails here, a little bit of chrome around the windows. And then the main detail is you see this line that runs all the way through, this character line, right round to the rear. At the rear, you get a full width light bar that runs all the way across. You get a wiper on the back, badge detailing here defining what the model is, and the boot is electrically operated. You get 425 litres of storage space as standard, and that increases to 1,440 litres when you fold down the rear seats, which have a 60-40 split. The Seal U will be available in 3 different specifications in Europe called Boost, Comfort and Design, and each of those get a bespoke powertrain option. It starts with the 1.5 litre petrol engine paired with a 145 kilowatt electric motor which drives the front wheels, and this one uses an 18.3 kilowatt hour battery. There's then the comfort version uses the same setup but has a larger 26.6 kilowatt hour battery, again driving the front wheels, but that does give it an increase in driving range of 125 kilometers using only electric power. The top spec design version is the only version that gets all-wheel drive. It still uses the 1.5 litre petrol engine, but it gains a turbocharger to increase performance, although this version is only paired with the smaller 18.3 kilowatt hour battery. It uses a 150 kilowatt front electric motor and 120 kilowatt rear electric motor. This version also has the lowest electric only driving range of 70 kilometers, but still that's a pretty respectable figure for a large all-wheel drive plug-in hybrid. When it comes to charging, the Seal U is equipped with an 11 kilowatt AC charger and an 18 kilowatt DC charger. That means it can go from 30 to 80% state of charge in 35 minutes for the smaller battery and 55 minutes for the larger battery. From the driver's seat, first thing you notice is that you do sit a little bit higher and you get quite a nice view out the front. The A-pillars are relatively slender, so you don't have a huge amount of blind spots there, which is great if you're driving around, particularly in urban environments. The cabin layout itself, it's actually quite nice. It's a simple enough design. There's nothing too fussy, nothing too complicated, which we like. And the driving position itself is quite good. There's a lot of adjustability. This seat is electrically adjustable in a number of different ways. So you can reach for height, where you want it positioned, even the angle of the backrest. The steering wheel is manually adjustable as well, and there's a fair amount of space there for reach and rake, so it's relatively easy for most people to find a comfortable driving position in this car. In front of the driver, you get a 12.3 inch fully digital display. It looks pretty good, it's nicely laid out, and it gives you all the relevant information very easily right in your eye line. There is also a head-up display as well, which will show you your speed, your next turn, all that kind of stuff as well. The steering wheel itself has a couple of controls on it. It's not festooned with buttons. They're mostly all sort of flat, but it's relatively easy to see and feel your way around when you are driving on the move. There's a slightly flat bottom to it, but overall it's a decent size. It's not too thick. and it does feel quite nice to have in your hands. The center console then, again, pretty simple layout. It's relatively wide. You've got 2 cup holders here. There's actually a very deep storage compartment in here as well, so that's great for burying odds and ends. It's also worth mentioning that the door bins will also take 2 small drinks bottles each. So again, this is very much kitted out for families in that sense as well. So there's lots of storage space in it. There's 2 wireless charging pads here in the center console, which is quite nice to have 2. You've got central air vents here as well, and all the drive controls are here in this center section. So you've got your stop start, you've got your small little kind of crystal-like gear knob here for going between forward and reverse. You've also got different driving modes that you can select as well while you're driving. You've got the normal, eco, normal and sport, but there's also then some off-road functions for this all-wheel drive model, including snowfield, muddy lanes, and sand as well. So you've got a couple of different drive modes there for full-on off-road. You can also select between EV and HEV as well. So with this powertrain, you can decide if you want to only drive it in electric, so long as there's charge in the battery, and you can also determine how much state of charge is maintained in the battery as well. So if you need to keep a certain amount of energy in the battery for maybe entering a low emission zone later on, or for returning home, you can do that as well. When that battery exceeds that, or when you go past that, the engine will automatically start and will then maintain that state of charge. But equally, you can also put it in the HEV mode, and it will then just drive normally like a hybrid, and the onboard systems will determine how and when to use the powertrain in its most efficient way. You also, being a BYD, get its novelty rotating screen. This 15-inch unit is quite nice to use. I think the infotainment system itself, the native one, could do with a little bit of improving, just in terms of how much inputs you have to do in certain screens and certain aspects, but it's a pretty nice layout. It's very quick to react to all the inputs, so as soon as you touch it, it's very quick to react. And you also then have other features like Android Auto and Apple CarPlay as well. So if you do want to connect your phone and use your own preferred apps, whether that's Waze, Google Maps, things like that, you can also do that too. Finally, the seats themselves, I did mention about how they position, how you can set them up, but they are also quite comfortable as well. There's a nice bit of support here on the sides. There's a nice quality to them as well. I quite like this two-tone color scheme, a little bit of orange piping there, and that's reflected in the stitching here as well. It's good quality interior. It feels solid, it feels well made. There's a nice mix of materials, and all the usual touch points that you'll come in contact with feel pretty good. When it comes to rear passenger space, that's really where the Seal U starts to excel. There's an awful lot of room back here. I'm a fairly average height. I'm 5'9". I don't have particularly long legs, and I'm sitting behind my normal driving position. And you can see just how much knee room I have here. I've also got pretty decent amount of headroom, although of course that panoramic glass sunroof does eat in slightly to the amount of room that you have. The flip side is it's so long that when it's open, you've got a great amount of light and visibility back here. But I've got decent door bins here. I've got an okay armrest as well. There's pockets in the backs of both front seats. I've got 2 USB-C charge ports here and rear ventilation, although I don't have temperature controls back here. And being, of course, a plug-in hybrid, because it is designed that way, the floor is completely flat. There's no bulky transmission tunnel running through the center here. So even whoever is sitting in this center seat won't be hard done by in terms of losing out on any legroom. If you don't have anybody in this middle seat, you can also pull down the center armrest. It has 2 cup holders built into it as well. So again, it's a little bit of a practical feature. And of course, both of the outer rear seats here have ISOFIX points, and they're very easy to access here as well. So parents of smaller kids will enjoy how much versatility and practicality the Seal U has to offer. First thing you'll notice when you begin driving the Seal U is that this is a car clearly built for comfort and for refinement. The suspension is definitely on the softer side, but that's no bad thing, because we've got this real trend at the moment, especially in SUVs such as this kind of size that manufacturers want to make them feel sporty by basically adding stiffer suspension and larger wheels. Now, even though this is on 19-inch wheels, they're relatively modest, and there's decent Michelin tires fitted to this car as well. But it's the suspension, more importantly, that does a very good job of soaking up all the surface imperfections. We've been driving on some pretty pockmarked roads here, and it's done a very good job, I've got to say, in terms of just soaking everything up and not jarring it all the way through the cabin as well. Also, the actual road noise, so the amount of noise coming into the cabin when you're driving, is to a large extent very, very well suppressed. It is a quiet car to drive in, and that's really part of the whole EV-like experience that this plug-in hybrid offers. Even driving along without the radio on, at times it's hard to gauge whether you're driving using only the electric motors or whether that 1.5 litre turbocharged, in this instance, petrol engine has activated. There's a very faint sort of hum as it's working away there. And even, you know, as you press on a little bit harder, when you demand a little bit more performance, it doesn't get very vocal at all. It's very quiet in that respect. Now, you can push on. This does have 319 horsepower combined and 550 newton meters of torque, so it's not a slouch in any way. But part of that comfort aspect of it does slightly come back to bite the Seal U when it comes to its dynamic ability. It does roll a little bit in the corners, so if you carry a bit of speed through a bend, the body will start to lean a little bit more. And in fact, as you soak everything up, you can occasionally get an extra sort of little bounce along the way. That was particularly evident when we were doing a motorway drive earlier, and it just felt very soft. In fact, probably a little bit too soft for my liking. Other people will probably enjoy just how soft and wallowy it could be. Definitely, it's going to make longer drives that bit more comfortable, as I mentioned, with that combined lower road noise inside the cabin, and of course being able to drive that little bit further using only electric power in this plug-in hybrid is a benefit. Now, the downside with the all-wheel drive system we're driving today is that this does have the shortest electric-only driving range at 70 kilometers. The front-wheel drive version, which has the same 18 kilowatt-hour battery, manages 10 kilometers more at 80 kilometers. But if you want to go above and beyond 100 kilometer range, you're going to need to get the front-wheel drive with the larger version, which is the middle car in the range. There are a couple of drive modes that you can choose from, and in the all-wheel drive that includes extra features for mud, sand and snow. But generally you're going to get eco, normal and sport, and changing those does change some of the parameters in how it drives. It increases urgency of the acceleration when you go to sport, but crucially it doesn't change the steering. You can change between the normal steering and a dynamic steering. We've got to do it through the menu system, and I'm okay with that. But I find that the normal steering is just a little bit too light at times, and it just doesn't have a whole lot of feedback in terms of what the front end is doing. Now, you can change that to the dynamic mode, but I think that nearly goes a little bit too far. If somehow BYD could add a little bit more steering feel to the normal mode, it'd be a much nicer setup. Another benefit of that all-wheel drive is that it does get up to speed quite quickly. So when you're joining a motorway, such as how we've done just now, it does get up to speed quite quickly, but it also does it quite smoothly. And that's really the key thing with this powertrain that has impressed me the most, is just how smooth it is, whether it's in electric mode or whether it's using both engines or just the combustion engine, which it can do in a situation like this. The transmission is super smooth. There's no lurching, there's no hesitation. You put your foot down, the instantaneous pickup of power is really what makes this feel like an electric car. Yes, you get the best of both worlds really with this, and it is a much nicer system. It's not like those CVT systems which always have a little bit of elasticity. When you put your foot down, there's a bit of a delay, and even though they're quite good now, they're not as good as the powertrain that is set up in this car. It is very, very smooth, but it is also quite efficient. Now, granted, we've done a real mixture of driving today, all sorts of things from motorways to country roads to city driving. And I've also not used all of the battery. So we didn't start with a full charge. And that was a bit of a deliberate thing because we wanted to see what it was like. Yes, you can drive it in its fully electric form all the time. And that's really the reason why you might want to buy this car, is because it has that longer electric range. But there are times then when you don't have that option. And in this case then, it did actually do quite a good job. It was relatively efficient. Over a 120 plus kilometer stint today in just the hybrid mode, it still returned 5.4 litres per 100 kilometers. And that was over a real mixture of different driving conditions, from towns and cities to country roads and even a bit of motorway. That's not a bad figure for a car of this size in a petrol engine. Obviously, you're probably going to mostly drive this car in a hybrid mode. After all, that's why you'd buy a plug-in hybrid like this. You want to absolutely maximize the battery that it has, and especially with a larger battery, you could very easily drive every single day, even if you have a slightly longer commute, without ever relying on that combustion engine to activate. That's a huge plus for cars like this. And the amount of space this has inside for families as well means there's really no compromise. There's bucket loads of room back there. You've still got a decent boot. And after all, this is going to be a car that could be very cheap to run. So that's our review of the new BYD Seal U DM-i. If you want to know more about this car, head over to our website. It's CompleteCar.ie. You'll find it linked in the description below, and it's a great resource for finding your next new car. But in the meantime, we'd love to know what you think about it, so please do head to the comments below and tell us what you think. Thanks for watching.